The rain came down hard that Tuesday morning. The kind of rain that makes you want to stay in bed and forget the world exists. But life doesn't stop for weather, does it? People still have places to be, jobs to get to, problems that won't solve themselves. Robert had been driving the number 47 bus for almost 8 years now. Same route, same stops, same faces most mornings. Some people might find that boring, but Robert never did. He saw it differently. Every person who stepped onto his bus was carrying their own story, their own weight. Some days that weight was light, other days it was crushing them. Robert had learned to see it in their eyes, in the way they held their shoulders, in whether they could manage a smile or not. At 42 years old, Robert wasn't the type to complain about his job. Sure, the pay wasn't great and the hours were long, but it was honest work. More than that, it gave him something he needed. Purpose, maybe. Or just a reason to get up in the morning and be useful to somebody. The morning started like any other. Robert pulled up to the first stop at exactly 6:15, right on schedule. Mrs. Patterson was there like always, holding 2 heavy grocery bags because she liked to shop early before the stores got crowded. Robert put the bus in park and stepped down to help her with those bags. She must have been 75 if she was a day. "You're too good to me," she said, like she always did. "Just doing my job, ma'am," Robert replied, though they both knew helping with groceries wasn't technically in his job description. 3 stops later, a young mother got on with a stroller, a diaper bag, and a toddler who clearly didn't want to be awake yet. The kid was crying. The mother looked like she hadn't slept in a week, and she was fumbling with trying to fold the stroller with one hand while holding the kid with the other. Robert waited patiently, ignoring the man in the 3rd row who kept checking his watch and sighing loudly. "Take your time," Robert called back to her. "We'll get there when we get there." The mother gave him a grateful look that said more than words could. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone to not rush them, to not make them feel like they're an inconvenience just for existing. The bus rolled on through the wet streets. Robert knew every pothole, every traffic light, every spot where the road got a little tricky. He'd driven this route so many times he could probably do it with his eyes closed, though he definitely wasn't going to try that. At the Maple Street stop, an elderly man with a cane struggled up the steps. Robert waited, didn't rush him. At Harrison Avenue, 3 teenagers got on, loud and laughing, full of that energy young people have before life teaches them to be tired. Robert smiled at them. He remembered being that young once, though it felt like a lifetime ago now. By 6:45, the bus was about half full. Morning commuters mostly, people heading to jobs they probably didn't love but needed, a few students with backpacks and headphones. A nurse still in her scrubs from a night shift, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Robert made eye contact with each person as they paid their fare. A small thing but important, everyone wants to be seen. That's when she got on. The woman who stepped onto the bus at the 6th and Pine stop looked like she'd been through something. Her clothes were wrinkled, the kind of wrinkled that comes from sleeping in them maybe for more than one night. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, strands falling loose around her face, but it was her eyes that struck Robert. They were red like she'd been crying for hours. More than that, though, they were hollow, empty in a way that made something twist in Robert's chest. She couldn't have been more than 30, but she moved like someone much older, like every step took effort she barely had. She climbed the bus steps slowly and started digging through her pockets. First the jacket pockets, then her jeans. She pulled out some coins, counted them in her shaking hands. Robert watched her face fall as she recounted the change, as if hoping the amount would somehow change the second time. The other passengers were watching too now, some with sympathy, some with impatience. The businessman in the suit checked his watch again, louder this time so everyone would notice. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I had enough. I just need to get to the hospital." "I'm so sorry," she counted the coins again. $1.23. The fare was $2.75. "I'm really sorry," she said again, and Robert could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "I can get off. I'll figure something else out." The businessman groaned. Someone in the back muttered something about people wasting everyone's time. The woman's hands were shaking harder now, the coins clinking together as she tried to put them back in her pocket. Robert looked at her, really looked at her. He'd seen that expression before. It wasn't just about bus fare. This was someone at the end of their rope. Someone who'd been holding it together for so long and was finally falling apart. Over $1.52, she was falling apart, which meant it wasn't really about the money at all. "Don't worry about it," Robert said calmly. "Go ahead and take a seat." The woman looked up at him, confusion mixing with the desperation in her eyes. "But I don't have enough." I said, "Don't worry about it. Consider it covered. Go on and sit down." She stood there for a moment frozen, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Robert gave her a small nod toward the seats. She moved slowly down the aisle, still holding those coins, looking back at him like she expected him to change his mind. Robert put the bus in gear and pulled back into traffic. The businessman was still grumbling, but Robert didn't care. That's the thing about this job. You get to make small decisions every day about what kind of person you're going to be. Robert had made his choice a long time ago. At the next red light, Robert did something he didn't usually do. He stood up, pulled out his wallet, and walked back to where the woman was sitting. She was staring out the window, tears running down her face, silent tears that she was trying to hide. "Excuse me," Robert said quietly. She looked up, startled. Robert held out a $20 bill. "Whatever you're dealing with at the hospital, get yourself some breakfast after, okay? And here." He pulled a small card from his wallet, one of several he kept there. It had a phone number on it for a crisis helpline, just in case you need someone to talk to. The woman stared at the money and the card like they were foreign objects she'd never seen before. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Whatever you're going through right now," Robert said, keeping his voice low so only she could hear, "you're worth more than you know. Things feel dark sometimes, but they won't always. You matter." He placed the 20 and the card on the seat next to her and walked back to the driver's seat. The light had turned green. Behind him, he could hear the woman crying harder now, but different. Not the silent tears of desperation, but something else. Something that sounded almost like relief. Robert drove on, thinking nothing more of it. It was just who he was, just what you do when you see someone hurting and you have the power to help, even in a small way. The bus continued down its route, stopping and starting, letting people off and picking new ones up. The rain kept falling. The city kept moving. And somewhere in the back of the bus, that woman sat holding $20 and a phone number, staring at both like they were a lifeline she hadn't known she needed. The woman got off at St. Mary's Hospital, 3 stops after Robert had given her the money. She turned back one more time before stepping off the bus, looking at him like she wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. She just nodded, clutching that $20 bill and the card in her hand, and disappeared into the hospital entrance. Robert continued his route like nothing unusual had happened, because to him it wasn't unusual. He'd been doing small things like this for years, letting people ride when they were short on fare, keeping those crisis helpline cards in his wallet, checking on passengers who looked troubled. It was just part of being human, wasn't it? Looking out for each other. He had no idea that 12 minutes later everything was about to change. The woman sat in the hospital waiting room, her leg bouncing nervously. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the smell of disinfectant too strong. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. She'd been living in that fog for weeks now, maybe months. Time had stopped meaning much of anything. She looked down at the $20 bill still in her hand, then at the card with the phone number. Something about those two simple things, offered by a stranger who didn't know her name or her story, had cracked something open inside her. The wall she'd been building to hold everything in had finally broken. Her phone was in her pocket, battery down to 8%. She hadn't charged it in 2 days, hadn't really cared to, but now she pulled it out, stared at the screen, and opened Facebook. She hadn't posted anything in months. The last post was from back when things were still normal, a picture of her coffee with some caption about Monday mornings. Her hands were shaking as she started typing. At first, she was just going to write a quick thank you, maybe tag the transit authority, hope somehow that bus driver would see it. But once she started, she couldn't stop. The words poured out of her. She wrote about her mother who was upstairs in room 407 dying. Stage 4 cancer, the doctors said. Maybe a week left, maybe less. She wrote about how she'd lost her job 3 months ago when she had to take too much time off to care for her mom, about the eviction notice on her apartment door because she couldn't pay rent, about the medical bills that kept piling up, numbers so big they didn't even feel real anymore. Then she wrote something she'd never admitted to anyone. She wrote about this morning, about how she'd stood on her apartment balcony at 5 a.m. looking down 4 stories, thinking how easy it would be to just step off, how tired she was of fighting, how she'd finally convinced herself to go say goodbye to her mother one last time, and then after that, maybe she'd just disappear. The world wouldn't miss her. Nobody would. But then that bus driver had seen her. Really seen her. Not just let her ride for free, but given her money he didn't have to give. Given her that card. Told her she mattered. A complete stranger had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than she'd felt in months. She typed through her tears, the phone screen blurring. She described Robert, what he looked like, the gentleness in his voice. She mentioned it was the number 47 bus, the 6:47 a.m. route. She tagged the Seattle Transit Authority. Then she wrote the words that would change everything. If you see this man, please help me find him. He saved my life today and he doesn't even know it. If a stranger could see I was worth saving when I couldn't see it myself, maybe I'm supposed to still be here. Maybe there's still good in this world worth staying for. She hit post and put her phone away. The battery was down to 5%. She didn't expect much from the post anyway. Maybe a few friends would see it, leave some heart emojis, tell her to stay strong. The usual things people say when they don't really know what to say. What happened next, nobody could have predicted. Within an hour, the post had been shared 200 times. Within 2 hours, 5,000. By lunchtime, news stations were calling her phone, which had died at the hospital. People who knew her were tracking down her friends, asking if they could share her story. A woman who'd been on that same bus that morning saw the post. She'd taken a picture out the window earlier, just a random shot of the rainy Seattle streets. And in the corner of the photo, you could see the inside of the bus. You could see Robert in the driver's seat, and in the background, that moment when he'd walked back to give the woman money. She shared the photo. I was there. I saw this happen. This driver was so kind to her. That photo got shared another 10,000 times. Local news picked it up for the 5 o'clock broadcast. Viral post about bus driver's kindness captures hearts across the nation. They read portions of the post on air, careful to blur out the parts about suicide, but keeping in the message about hope and humanity. By evening, the post had reached 1 million people. Then 2 million. People were adding their own stories in the comments, thousands of them. Stories about strangers who'd helped them in dark moments. About small acts of kindness that had changed everything. About times they'd wanted to give up, but someone had reminded them they mattered. Someone started a hashtag. Find the kind bus driver. It was trending within hours. The transit authority's social media notifications were exploding. Their phone lines were jammed with people calling to ask about the driver on Route 47, asking if they could donate money to him, asking how they could help. The social media manager, working late, was frantically trying to figure out which driver it had been. A local news station sent a crew to the transit depot that evening, hoping to catch someone coming off shift who might know something. The night manager, confused by all the attention, checked the schedule. Route 47, morning shift. That was Robert's route. By 10 p.m., someone had started a GoFundMe for the kind bus driver who saved a life. The description was simple. This man showed compassion when someone needed it most. Let's show him the world is full of good people too. The goal was set at $5,000, just enough to maybe give him a nice thank you. It reached that goal in 40 minutes. Then it hit 10,000, 20,000. By midnight, complete strangers from across the country had donated over $80,000 to a man whose name they didn't even know yet. Television producers were making calls. Talk show hosts were asking their assistants to track down this story. A Hollywood agent saw the post and started thinking about film rights. Everyone wanted a piece of the viral moment. Meanwhile, Robert had gone home to his small apartment at the end of his shift. He'd fed his old dog, a rescue mutt named Buddy who'd been with him through some dark times. He'd made himself a simple dinner, chicken and rice. He'd watched some TV, nothing special, just whatever was on. His phone had been off all day like it always was during work. He'd forgotten to turn it back on when he got home. He usually did. He had no idea that his face was being shared millions of times, that his simple act of kindness had touched something deep in people, had reminded them that goodness still exists, that the woman whose life he'd touched was telling the whole world about him. That tomorrow morning when he showed up for work, everything would be different. Robert went to bed that night the same man he'd been for years. Quiet, private, just trying to get through his days by helping others when he could. But the world had other plans for him now. The story was too big, too powerful, too perfect for the moment everyone was living in. People needed hope, needed to believe in kindness, needed proof that one person could make a difference, and tomorrow, Robert was going to find out just how much his small moment of compassion had changed everything. Robert woke up at 5:30 a.m., same as always. His alarm hadn't even gone off yet. His body just knew when it was time to get up after years of the same routine. Buddy was still snoring at the foot of the bed. Old dog didn't move as fast as he used to in the mornings. Robert went through his usual routine. Shower, coffee, let Buddy out in the small backyard. He made himself toast with peanut butter, standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down for breakfast felt like wasting time somehow. The apartment was quiet. It was always quiet. That's how Robert liked it these days. He still hadn't turned his phone on from yesterday. It sat on the counter, dark and silent. He thought about charging it, but decided he'd do it at work. The thing was old anyway, barely held a charge anymore. At 6:20, Robert grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the streetlights in the early morning darkness. The bus depot was a 20-minute drive from his apartment. Robert knew he'd get there right at 6:40, clock in, do his vehicle inspection, and be pulling out for his route by 7. Everything was normal until he turned onto the street leading to the depot. There were news vans, 3 of them, parked along the street with their satellite dishes extended. Reporters stood around drinking coffee, camera operators checking their equipment. Robert slowed down, confused. Had there been an accident? Some kind of emergency at the depot? He pulled into the parking lot, and that's when things got weird. The reporters saw his car, and suddenly they were moving, walking quickly toward the employee entrance. One of them pointed at him. Robert's stomach dropped. What was going on? Inside the depot, it was chaos. Drivers who should have been out on their routes were standing around in groups talking excitedly. The supervisor, a man named Tom, who usually looked half asleep this early in the morning, practically ran over when he saw Robert come in. "Robert, thank God. We need to talk. Right now." "In my office." Tom's face was strange. Not angry, not worried exactly, but something else. Something between amazement and panic. "What's going on?" Robert asked, following Tom through the depot. Other drivers were staring at him, some smiling, some looking confused. Tom closed the office door and pulled out his phone. "You haven't checked your phone today, have you?" "No, it's dead." "Tom, what's happening?" "Why are there news vans outside?" Tom turned his phone around and showed Robert the screen. It was a Facebook post, but the numbers didn't make sense. 2.3 million shares. 15 million reactions. Tom scrolled down and Robert saw his own face, a photo someone had taken through a bus window. "You're viral, Robert. You're all over the internet. National news picked it up overnight. That woman you helped yesterday, she wrote about it and the whole world saw." Robert took the phone with shaking hands and started reading. He read about the woman's mother dying in the hospital, about her losing her job, her apartment, about standing on her balcony that morning thinking about ending everything, about how his simple kindness had given her a reason to keep going. His throat got tight. His eyes burned. He'd had no idea. He'd just seen someone hurting and tried to help. "That's all?" "Robert, man, there's more." Tom pulled up another screen, a GoFundMe page. People have donated over $180,000. For you, they want to thank you. The room tilted. Robert had to sit down. $180,000. That was more money than he'd make in 4 years of driving. For what? For being decent to someone. The reporters outside want interviews, Tom continued. Good Morning America called. The transit authority wants to give you some kind of award. Your phone probably has about 1,000 messages on it. Robert, you're famous. Famous? The word hit Robert like a punch to the chest. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want attention. He'd spent the last 5 years trying to disappear into his routine, into the simple rhythm of driving the same route every day. After everything that had happened, after losing his wife and daughter in that accident, anonymity was the only peace he'd found. I need some air, Robert said, standing up too fast. The room spun a little. The reporters are outside, Tom warned. I'll go out back. Robert walked through the depot in a daze. People were calling his name, wanting to talk to him, but he just kept walking. Out the back door into the cold morning air. He leaned against the brick wall and tried to breathe. His wife would have known what to do with all this. She'd always been the social one, the one who knew how to handle attention. But she was gone. Had been gone for 5 years now, along with their 7-year-old daughter. A drunk driver, an intersection, and suddenly Robert's whole world had ended. That's why he carried those crisis cards. That's why he noticed when people were hurting. Because he knew what rock bottom looked like. He'd been there himself. So far down he didn't think he'd ever see light again. A grief counselor had given him those cards after the accident, had told him to call if he ever needed help. Robert had kept them, not for himself at first, but eventually he'd started giving them to other people. Helping others had become the only thing that made him feel human again, and now the whole world knew about it. They knew about one moment, one act of kindness, but they didn't know the why. They didn't know about the nights he still couldn't sleep, about how he'd chosen to drive a bus because the routine was the only thing keeping him from falling apart, about how every person he helped was really him trying to save himself. Tom came outside. "Robert, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to decide something. Those reporters aren't leaving. The story's too big now. You can either talk to them, or we can issue a statement on your behalf." "I just wanted to help someone," Robert said quietly. "That's all. I didn't want this, I know, buddy. But sometimes we don't get to choose when our actions matter to people. That woman you helped, she's alive because of you. And now millions of people are being reminded that kindness exists. That's not nothing." Robert closed his eyes. He thought about the woman on the bus, the emptiness in her eyes that he'd recognized because he'd seen it in his own mirror. He thought about all the other people over the years he'd helped in small ways. None of it had been for recognition. None of it had been for reward. But maybe Tom was right. Maybe this wasn't about him anymore. Maybe it was bigger than his own discomfort with attention. "What do I say to them?" Robert asked. "The truth. Whatever you're comfortable sharing. You don't owe anyone your whole story." Robert stood there for a long moment, gathering himself. Then he nodded. "Okay, I'll talk to them. But no cameras in my face, and I'm not taking that money. Give it to mental health organizations or something. I don't want it." "Robert, people gave that money specifically for you. Then they can give it specifically to help people who need it more than I do." "I'm serious, Tom. I don't want it." They walked back through the depot together. The other drivers patted Robert on the back as he passed, said things like, "Proud of you, man, and always knew you were one of the good ones." Robert felt uncomfortable with all of it, but he tried to smile and nod. At the front entrance, Tom opened the door. The reporters saw them and surged forward. Microphones appeared, cameras started rolling. Questions flew at him from every direction. "How does it feel to be a hero? Did you know you saved her life? What made you help her? Will you accept the money people donated?" Robert held up his hand and the noise died down a little. He looked at all these people, these strangers who'd driven here before sunrise to talk to him. Behind them he could see the sun just starting to rise, painting the wet streets gold. "I'm not a hero," Robert said, his voice steady but quiet. "I just saw someone who needed help and I helped them. That's what we're supposed to do for each other. That's all." "But you gave her money, gave her hope when she had none," one reporter pushed. Robert looked directly at the camera. He thought about that woman, wherever she was right now. He thought about everyone else out there who might be standing on a balcony at 5 a.m., wondering if the world would miss them. "If you're hurting," he said, "please know you matter. Whatever you're going through, it won't last forever, and there are people who care, even if they're strangers. Please don't give up." The reporters were quiet for a moment. Then the questions started again, but Robert had said what he needed to say. He'd put his truth out into the world. Now he just wanted to drive his bus. The media attention didn't fade like Robert hoped it would. If anything, it got bigger. His face was everywhere. The local news, national news, even international outlets picked up the story. Bus driver saves woman's life with simple act of kindness. Became the feel-good story everyone needed in a world that felt increasingly dark. Robert tried to go back to his normal routine, but normal didn't exist anymore. Passengers recognized him now. Some wanted selfies. Others cried when they got on his bus, telling him about their own struggles, their own dark moments. He listened to every single one because that's who he was. But by the end of each shift, he felt drained in a way he never had before. The transit authority threw him a ceremony. The mayor showed up, gave a speech about civic heroes. They gave Robert a plaque and a bonus check for $1,000. He smiled for the photos because that's what they wanted, but inside he felt hollow. This wasn't why he'd helped that woman. This wasn't the point at all. The GoFundMe money kept growing. It hit $200,000. People were sending him letters, packages, gifts. A restaurant offered him free meals for life. A car dealership wanted to give him a new truck. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, wanted to be connected to this moment of viral goodness. But Robert couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong about all of it. The story was being simplified, packaged into something neat and inspiring. Nobody wanted to hear about his grief, his loss, his own struggles. They just wanted the easy version where he was a hero and everything was beautiful. Real life wasn't that simple. 3 weeks after that morning on the bus, Robert got a phone call at home. It was from the transit authority. The woman from the bus wanted to meet him. She'd reached out through official channels, asking if Robert would be willing to talk to her privately, away from cameras and reporters. Robert's first instinct was to say no. He'd done what he needed to do. She was alive, she was getting help, that was enough. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to know if his small action had really made the difference everyone said it did. Okay, he told them. I'll meet her. They arranged it at the Transit Authority's main office in a small conference room away from the public areas. Robert showed up 15 minutes early, nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. He didn't know what to expect. Would she thank him? Would it be awkward? Would she want something from him? When she walked in, Robert almost didn't recognize her. She looked different from that morning on the bus. Her hair was clean and styled. She wore clothes that fit properly. But more than that, her eyes were different. They weren't hollow anymore. There was life in them, even though he could still see sadness there too. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from him. Her hands were folded on the table, nervous but steady. "Of course," Robert said, not sure what else to say. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, Robert could see the city moving. People going about their lives, unaware of the two people in this room whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. "My mother passed away," the woman said finally, 4 days after that morning. "I was with her when she went." "I'm sorry," Robert said, and meant it. "Don't be. I got to say goodbye. I got to tell her I loved her one more time. If I'd done what I planned to do that morning, I wouldn't have had that." "You gave me that," Robert's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say to that. The woman looked at him directly. "I need you to understand something. When I got on your bus that day, I was already gone. In my head, I'd already made the decision. I was just going through the motions, doing one last thing before I disappeared. And then you saw me." "I just helped you with bus fare," Robert said quietly. "No. You saw me as a human being when I'd stopped seeing myself that way. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen when you're invisible even to yourself?" Robert did know. He knew exactly what that felt like. He'd felt invisible for 5 years, ever since the accident. Going through motions, existing but not really living. Helping others was the only time he felt real. "I read about your family," the woman continued. "After everything blew up online, reporters dug into your background. I know about your wife and daughter. I'm sorry that happened to you." Robert stiffened. This was what he'd been afraid of. His grief wasn't public property. It wasn't part of the story people wanted to hear. "I'm telling you this because I need you to know something," she went on. "All this attention you're getting, all these people calling you a hero, I know it probably feels wrong. Like they don't understand. But here's what I figured out. You helped me because you know what it's like to want to disappear. You carry those crisis cards because someone gave them to you once. You notice people in pain because you've been there." Robert looked at her, surprised. She understood. She actually understood. "I started a foundation," the woman said, "in my mother's name. It's focused on suicide prevention and mental health support. We've already raised over $40,000 in 3 weeks. And I want you to be part of it, not as some spokesperson or figurehead, but as someone who actually gets it, someone who's been in the dark and found a way to keep going." "I'm not qualified for that," Robert said automatically. "You're the most qualified person I know. You don't need a degree or certification to understand pain. You just need to have lived through it." Robert sat back in his chair. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd thought she'd thank him and they'd go their separate ways. But she was offering him something else. Something that felt like purpose beyond just driving his route every day. "The money from the GoFundMe," the woman said. "I know you told them to donate it to mental health organizations. But some of it, A lot of it, actually, people specified it was for you personally. $130,000 that can't be redirected. It's yours whether you want it or not. Robert shook his head. I don't want it. It feels wrong. Then use it for something that feels right. Start a scholarship. Fund crisis counselors for transit workers. Help other families dealing with loss. But don't refuse it out of guilt or discomfort. That money represents thousands of people who were moved by what you did. Honor that. Robert thought about his daughter. She'd be 12 now if she'd lived. She'd always talked about wanting to help people when she grew up, even at 7 years old. Maybe there was a way to honor that, to keep her memory alive in something meaningful. I need time to think about this, Robert said. Of course, I'm not trying to pressure you. I just wanted you to know the offer stands. And I wanted to tell you something else. The woman's eyes got bright with tears. You gave me permission to keep living, so I'm giving you permission to not carry everything alone. You've been helping everyone else for years. Maybe it's time to let people help you too. Those words hit Robert harder than anything else had in weeks. He'd been so focused on not being a burden, on dealing with his grief privately, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to accept help. To admit he was struggling. I have a therapist now, the woman continued. A good one. She's helping me work through everything. The guilt of being relieved my mother's suffering is over. The grief of losing her. The shame of how close I came to giving up. It's hard work, but I'm doing it. You should consider it too. Robert wanted to argue, to say he was fine, but that would be a lie. He wasn't fine. He'd just gotten good at pretending. Maybe, he said instead, which was more honest than no. They talked for another hour, about loss, about grief, about how hard it is to keep showing up every day when everything feels heavy, about the weirdness of viral fame and how quickly people forget that behind every inspiring story are real, complicated people. When they finally said goodbye, the woman hugged him. Robert couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him. He'd avoided touch for so long, afraid it would crack open the grief he kept carefully contained. But this hug felt different. It felt like understanding passing between two people who'd both touched darkness and chosen, however reluctantly, to come back. Walking back to his car, Robert felt something shift inside him. The weight he'd been carrying wasn't gone, but it felt different somehow. Less like a burden he had to bear alone and more like something he could possibly share. His phone buzzed. Another message from a stranger thanking him. He'd gotten hundreds of them. Usually he just deleted them, but this time he read it. A woman in Ohio saying his story had made her reach out to her estranged brother. They were talking again after 5 years of silence. Maybe this attention, this viral moment, wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about what one small action could inspire in others. A reminder that we're all connected, that kindness ripples outward in ways we never see. Robert got in his car and sat there for a moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He called the grief counselor whose number he still had saved in his phone. 6 months passed. The viral moment faded like they all do. The news moved on to other stories, other heroes, other moments of inspiration that would trend for a week and then disappear. People stopped recognizing Robert on the street. The messages slowed down, then stopped altogether. Life returned to something close to normal, but not exactly normal. Because Robert had changed, even if he didn't fully realize it at first. He still drove the number 47 bus, still woke up at 5:30, still made his toast and coffee standing at the kitchen counter. But now he was seeing a therapist every Tuesday afternoon. A woman named Dr. Chen who didn't try to fix him or rush his grief, who just sat with him while he finally, slowly, started to talk about what he'd lost. It was harder than Robert expected. Talking about his wife, about his daughter, about the accident. Some sessions he barely said anything, just sat there feeling the weight of it all. But Dr. Chen never pushed. She just waited, patient and present, until he was ready. Grief doesn't have a timeline, she told him once. You don't get over it. You just learn to carry it differently. That made sense to Robert. The pain hadn't gone away, but it felt less like drowning now. More like a heavy coat he'd learned to wear without it pulling him under. The foundation the woman had started was growing. They'd named it after dawn, because that's what those dark moments before sunrise feel like. Like you might not make it to morning, but then somehow you do, and the sun comes up anyway. Robert joined the board like she'd asked. At first he just attended meetings, listening more than talking. But gradually he found himself speaking up, sharing ideas from his own experience. They started a program training transit workers to recognize signs of crisis, to know what to say when someone seemed like they were struggling. They partnered with the city to put crisis helpline information in every bus and train car. Robert used $70,000 from the GoFundMe money to start a scholarship fund in his daughter's name. It went to kids who'd lost parents, helping them pay for college or trade school. The rest he donated to After Dawn and to a grief support program at the local hospital. Keeping the money for himself had never felt right. But using it to honor his daughter, to help others who were hurting, that felt like something. Like maybe all this pain could be transformed into something that mattered. One Tuesday morning in early spring, Robert was doing his usual route when a teenage boy got on at the Maple Street stop. The kid looked nervous, kept patting his pockets like he was checking for something. When he got to the fare box, his face fell. "I'm sorry," the boy said, his voice cracking. "I thought I had my bus pass, but I can't find it. Can I get on anyway? I really need to get to school." Robert saw something in the kid's eyes. That same look he'd seen 6 months ago. That hollow desperation, maybe not as deep, but heading that direction. "Don't worry about it," Robert said. "Take a seat." The boy nodded, relieved, and started walking toward the back. But Robert noticed something else. As the kid passed, Robert saw the edge of what looked like bruises on his neck, barely visible above his collar. Robert made a decision. At the next red light, he stood up and walked back to where the boy was sitting, staring out the window. "Hey," Robert said gently. "You doing okay?" The boy looked up, surprised. "Yeah, fine. Thanks for letting me ride." Robert could have left it there, could have gone back to his seat and continued the route. But something made him stay. "You know, I keep some extra bus passes up front, and some snacks if you're hungry. Also got some cards with phone numbers in case you ever need someone to talk to." The boy's eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe? Or gratitude. "I'm okay," he said, but his voice was softer now. "I'm sure you are," Robert said. "But just in case you're ever not okay, those resources are there. No judgment, no questions. Everyone needs help sometimes." The boy nodded, and Robert saw his jaw tighten like he was trying not to cry. Robert had been there. He knew that feeling of barely holding it together, of one kind word being enough to crack you open. "I'm Robert, by the way. I drive this route every weekday morning. You're always welcome here." "Thanks," the boy whispered. Robert went back to his seat and continued driving. He didn't know the kid's story. Didn't know if he was dealing with abuse, bullying, family problems, or something else entirely. But he'd planted a seed. Sometimes that's all you can do. At the end of his shift, Robert did something new, something he'd started doing a few months back. He'd placed a small basket near the fare box. The kind of thing you might see at a coffee shop for tips, but this wasn't for money. The basket was filled with bus tokens, granola bars, and those crisis helpline cards. A small handwritten sign next to it said, "Take what you need. Leave what you can. You matter." Every day people took things from the basket, and surprisingly people left things too. Extra tokens, snacks, notes of encouragement. One person had left a small book about overcoming depression. Someone else had added a list of free mental health resources in the city. It had become this small community thing, this shared understanding that everyone struggles sometimes and we're supposed to look out for each other. That evening, Robert met the woman from the bus for coffee. They'd started doing this once a month, just checking in with each other. She'd become something like a friend, though it was a friendship born from unusual circumstances. "How's your mom doing?" Robert asked, then immediately realized his mistake. "I mean, how are you doing?" "With everything?" She smiled sadly. "It's okay. I still catch myself wanting to call her sometimes. But it's getting easier. Therapy helps, and keeping busy with the foundation. We got approval for that school program, by the way. Starting next fall, we'll have counselors in 15 schools across the district." "That's great," Robert said, and meant it. "How about you? How's the therapy going?" Robert thought about it. "It's hard. But good hard, you know? Like I'm finally dealing with things instead of just pushing them down." "I'm proud of you," she said. "I know that probably sounds weird coming from me, but I am." It didn't sound weird. It sounded like what it was. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and were figuring out how to live in the light. They talked about the foundation, about future programs, about life. She told him about going back to school, studying social work. He told her about the teenage boy on the bus that morning, how he hoped the kid would be okay. "You can't save everyone," she said gently, I know, but I can try to help when I can. That's enough, and it was enough. Robert had finally learned that. He couldn't fix the world, couldn't bring back his wife and daughter, couldn't erase his own pain or anyone else's. But he could show up. He could be kind. He could notice when someone was hurting and offer them a lifeline, even if it was just a bus ride and a card with a phone number. 6 months ago, a simple act of kindness had gone viral and changed his life in ways he never expected. But the real change wasn't the fame or the money or the attention. It was this: learning to accept help while helping others, understanding that his pain could coexist with purpose. That grief and hope weren't opposites but could live side by side in the same heart. Robert drove his bus route the next morning like always. An elderly woman needed help with her bags. A young mother struggled with a stroller. A college student fell asleep and almost missed her stop. Normal moments, small moments, the kind that never make the news. At the Harrison Avenue stop, the teenage boy from yesterday got on again. This time he had his bus pass. He swiped it and started walking back, but then he stopped. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a granola bar, walked back to the front and placed it in Robert's basket. Their eyes met for just a second. The boy gave a small nod. Robert nodded back. No words were needed. That tiny exchange said everything. Sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest gestures. A bus ride, a $20 bill, a card with a phone number, a basket of snacks. These things seem insignificant until you understand that to someone who's drowning, even the smallest lifeline can make all the difference. Robert continued his route, the morning sun breaking through the clouds, painting everything gold. His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen confirming their appointment next week. Another message from the foundation about an upcoming event. A picture from the woman of her first day back at school, giving a thumbs up to the camera. Life wasn't perfect. The grief was still there, probably always would be. But so was this: connection, purpose, the quiet satisfaction of showing up every day and trying to make things a little better in whatever small ways he could. The bus rolled on through the city streets, carrying people to wherever they needed to go. And Robert, sitting in the driver's seat, finally felt like he was moving forward too, not leaving his past behind but carrying it with him in a way that honored what he'd lost while still making room for what might come. That was enough. That was everything. The story that had captivated millions of people online wasn't really about one viral moment. It was about this: the ordinary work of being human, of seeing each other, of choosing kindness even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, of understanding that we're all just trying to make it through, and sometimes we need someone to remind us that we're not alone. And on a Tuesday morning, on the number 47 bus route in Seattle, that's exactly what was happening. One ride at a time, one person at a time, one small act of kindness that might save someone's life or might just make their day a little bit easier. Both were worth it. Both mattered. And Robert finally understood that.